Again, good morning to those joining us in Zoom and on Facebook. My name is Logan LaPierre. I'm the program manager with the Tri-City Regional Chamber of Commerce. I'm really excited today for this session. It's something we've been talking about for, I feel like maybe a little over a month at this point. And so some quick reminders before we get started with the presentations. We have 3 different presentations lined up today, and we definitely welcome any questions you have throughout the webinar. So if you're on Facebook, feel free to submit your questions as a comment, and we will go ahead and grab those as they come in. If you're in Zoom, feel free to use the chat feature or the Q&A feature, and we will address your questions as well on Zoom. So with that, I'm going to stop talking. I'm going to turn things over to Kevin Sakamoto with STCU, and he will go ahead and introduce our speakers.
All right, thank you, Logan. We are fortunate today to have with us three presenters, and in no particular order of the presentation. We have Reed Simmock. He is the Youth Employment Specialist at the Department of Labor and Industries. He's been with LNI since 2018 and is passionate about worker rights. He assists a variety of groups, including businesses, minors, and schools with understanding Washington's child labor rules. We also have with us Stephanie Sherm. She's the Career Center Director and Worksite Learning Coordinator at Richland High School. She graduated from the University of Wyoming with a BS in Marketing and Business Education, and holds a Master's of Education in Education Administration from Heritage University. She has 22 years of experience in career and technical education and a passion for helping students find a career path. And third, we have Lance Kenmore, who with his wife Karen they've been selling real estate in the Tri-Cities for over 20 years. As Tri-Cities natives, they've been able to see the changes in our area and grow with those changes. They currently run the #1 real estate team in Tri-Cities, selling over 400 homes a year. And their property management company manages over 400 rental units for investors as well. So we are thankful to the 3 panelists for being with us today, and we hope you enjoy the presentation. Thank you.
Well, good morning, everyone, and thank you for joining us. As we begin this conversation, and you can go ahead and forward that. I want to talk to you a little bit about what students gain from working while they're in high school. I speak with parents and community members all the time, and it has really become apparent that jumpstart as they move on to begin building their career. They show improved academic achievement. Students who work between 12 and 20 hours a week tend to manage their time much better. And they begin to improve academically. Also, as the school monitors their work, we do require them to maintain a certain grade status in order to be able to continue working. They learn to build those skills, being on time, being punctual, communicating, using the telephone. Some of those soft skills that they might otherwise be lacking, they learn them quickly, so that as they move through their post-secondary experience and into their entry-level career positions, they're better equipped to handle them. They demonstrate increased self-confidence. They get that real workplace experience that we talked about, and those basic employability skills that are transferable in any position that they might encounter. A lot of times what we find with our students who are working is they are able to connect with an adult role model that can become their mentor. And they really are more prone to continue to seek some type of post-secondary training. Now, whether you believe that college is for all, or whether you believe that some people do better with alternate forms of secondary training, I think most of us agree that students need something beyond their high school education. And what we found with students who are in the workplace is they seek that out, whether it's a military situation, an apprenticeship, whether it's possibly a technical school, a 2-year program, or a 4-year program. The students who were working in high school move forward with that. What I really want to talk to you, and one of my largest functions at Richland High School and Richland School District, is to talk about work-based learning. And that's a big umbrella term that we use in education to talk about all the activities that we do to facilitate students' knowledge of the workplace in the classrooms. It can be guest speakers, mentors, job shadows, structured field trips. We have school-based enterprises that are located on our campus and give our students an opportunity to work in a semi-authentic workplace. So we have our student store at Richland High, and we also have a GISA branch of the credit union that we operate in a partnership with them. But what I really want to talk today about is worksite learning. Worksite learning really is a program that provides students the opportunity to learn in the workplace while they're applying the skills and knowledge obtained in what we call a qualifying class. It adds structure and support to their work experience, and it amplifies those benefits for the students and the employers. Students who participate in worksite learning not only earn a paycheck, but they also earn high school credit for the work that they do. Worksite learning is a partnership between the employer, the employee, and the school district. Students earn high school credit, like we just talked about, if they're in an approved worksite learning placement. Students connect classroom learning to develop skills and employ the skills that they've already learned in school. They are goal-oriented. One of the components of worksite learning is that students, the worksite learning coordinator at their school, whether it's at Richland or Kennewick or Pasco, they sit down and they create together 3 to 5 learning targets for the student during that graded time period. So students are always working to improve their skills and move forward. The worksite learning coordinator is available to support employers and employees if they run into difficulties or are having problems in any situation. That's a support that comes to you through work-based learning that's not available when you just hire a high school student. What's required of the employers in that partnership is really the only thing that is different in just hiring a high school student and working with work-based learning is that we ask you to participate in an overview of the worksite learning program with me or with another coordinator from another high school. That usually takes less than 15 minutes. And then also that you are willing to communicate and evaluate on the student's performance during their time with you. A student that qualifies for worksite learning will need to have turned 16, and that is state law for worksite learning. They need to have a minimum GPA according to that particular school district standard. We have them take a qualifying course. They can previously have taken it or they can concurrently take it. That course is designed to provide specific knowledge to the placement that they have. So, for example, if we had a student seeking employment in a floral shop and they had taken floral design, or if we had a student working in a restaurant who had taken either a marketing course or a foods and nutrition course, we could have a young person who has taken child development and maybe they're working in a daycare. Really, those are very specific options, and we do have the opportunity to get a little creative with those. They need to work at least 180 hours per grading period. So for the case of high school students at Richland High, we do a semester. And so the student would need to earn 180 hours in that semester, which is 16 weeks. So it's about an average of 12 hours a week. Have a learning agreement signed by the employer, the parent, the student, and the worksite learning coordinator, and then work in cooperation with the employer to have a learning plan in place. The worksite learning coordinator then will assist in the development of those positions. So if you're a business and you think, gosh, I'd like to have a work-based learning student, but I really don't know what they can do, I'm happy to sit down and have a conversation with you, help you build that program or that position. Consult with the worksite supervisor regarding the learning agreement. So at each work site where we have students, we have an adult worksite supervisor that oversees their work, and I would communicate with them. I would collaborate with that supervisor to develop their learning plan. And then I always serve as a consultant to all parties. And then finally, I just make sure that there's been an employee orientation. So what are the benefits to business and employers? Because I think that's what's most important. We know this helps students, but what does it do for our businesses? One of the things that it does is it really does create a more robust talent pipeline. So businesses can embrace that grow your own talent development strategy and really teach those students from the ground up what makes a great employee. They have the opportunity to develop employees with skills that are needed for difficult to fill positions. Businesses also have the opportunity to train and observe potential employees. And an example of that was, we have several students over the years who have been work-based learning students at Energy Northwest. Energy Northwest has been a great partner for us. They provide these positions year after year. So students don't stay in that work-based learning position beyond that experience, but it does give them a very good opportunity to observe that employee for a year and know if they would like to hire them into a long-term position. And we have several students who have had that opportunity. It also helps to create a diverse and innovative workforce. You can cultivate diversity in the pipeline by promoting or providing structure and support and training for people of different backgrounds that will help them to succeed. And then companies with diverse workforces are stronger and more competitive because their teams consist of individuals who bring a range of perspectives and innovative ideas. A lot of times I will hear adults say, gosh, you know, students, young people, I'm scared of them. But I think what I find working with them is they're different and they behave differently perhaps than those of us who grew up in the 80s, but they have great ideas, they have fresh perspectives, and with a little bit of training or coaching, they really develop into great employees with new, fresh ideas that can be really beneficial to our workplace. It's also great for you to earn a reputation for being a great place to work. Many organizations that I've talked to find that their staff turnover rates decline. Employees who see these programs in operation believe that that company cares about their workforce, that they're more likely to be willing to train and offer support, and they tend to stay pretty loyal to those companies. Job seekers who are looking for work and see companies that offer worksite learning programs see that as a plus when they evaluate them as potential employers, because they see that that company is willing to give back to their employees. It also boosts business perspectives by helping strengthen the local economy, foster growth by contributing to the creation of a skilled workforce. Workers who have opportunities to earn credentials and develop new skills benefit the community by reducing unemployment and increasing consumer spending. Always a plus. It also gives us an opportunity to close the skills gap. That's one of the biggest conversations I hear when I attend economic development conferences is we have a skills gap. Our students don't have the skills that our employers are looking for. And regardless of what technology advancements we incur, we're always going to need talent, and we're always going to need people in our companies. And so when industry and business shift their focus to an engaged partner in this solution, they create that talent. So if it's time for you to invest in the supply of talent, please talk to a work-based learning program coordinator and see how you can help produce that skilled and knowledgeable talent. I am open to taking any questions you might have.
My computer's going a little slow today, so I apologize. If anyone has any questions for Stephanie, please put them in the chat or the Q&A. And of course, if we move on and you want to come back to Stephanie, please feel free to do so. We'll also have some time at the very end for questions, but I take that as a good sign that you covered everything, Stephanie. So, thank you. All right, so we're going to turn things over to Lance Kenmore. Lance, we invited him here because he has some experience working with students, working with the school district. So I am going to turn things over to you, Lance, to give us some of your knowledge and expertise.
All right. Well, thanks a lot. I'm not nearly as proficient as Stephanie with a slideshow, but if anybody has any questions afterwards, I'd be glad to email my notes over to you. I kind of put down like 8 key points that I found that make the experience, a little bit better from the employer standpoint. So they didn't approve my notes, so I hope I don't say anything Stephanie didn't want me to say. But the first thing that I put down, and not every school has this program, but I did put down, if possible, hire from the school you went to. Like if you were fortunate enough to have a great connection here with a local high school, it does a couple things. I think it helps you build rapport with the student faster. You have some commonality right away with the student. You have a mutual understanding of what they're going through and can kind of talk to them on that level. And I think it means a little bit more to the students when you're talking to them in their language. And then you're just naturally way more invested in that program right from the beginning. I mean, I've had students from other programs outside of that school, but if I can, it makes it a little bit more fun. So that was point number 1, was just hire from the school you went to if there's a great program in place. For me, I'm very fortunate that Richland has that. The second thing that I put down as kind of my point with students is you do have to be prepared to be a little bit flexible. They are students. So if you're going to be like really hardcore, this is exactly how it is on the employment side with no flexibility, for me, I think that would be a little bit of a struggle. I mean, things come up. Like if a kid is in this program, they're probably also very active in, say, sports, or they're going to have a big week with testing at school or special events that come up. So I would just say have good open lines of communication with that student. Have some awareness for some flexibility in what's going on with their schedule. The third thing that we do, and Stephanie's really good about this in the beginning with the students, but setting clear expectations up front. I mean, that's good with any employee, but especially with a student, We really like to have clear expectations, like what's their job description, what are the duties that they're going to be performing, and then even, you know, times to come to work. What does that look like? Who do you notify if you're going to be late or something comes up? So setting those clear expectations up front are good. For me, from a best employer practices, I like to pay with the students. I like to pay slightly higher than market rates. Like, so I don't know, I look at things a little bit differently than people sometimes, but number one, it's not a lot of hours. So I can afford to pay a little bit more. The second reason why I do that, just, you know, selfishly, is they brag to all of their friends and the other students. And so I find that they're recruiting my next student work-based learning program if I pay them a little bit more. So I like that. And then I just feel like they're a little bit more committed to the job. I did write down too, for best practices, it's something little, but I put like, give them company swag. Like if they've got a shirt with your name on it, it's so fun to see. Like, I mean, they wear those type of shirts and stuff, you know, to school, and even more so than some of our own employees. And so I think it makes them feel like a part of the team and that they belong to the organization. And then it's also, once again, more advertising for you. The other thing that I had that's really important is, especially if you're at the top end of your organization, or COO or CEO, is still try to, even if you're not the direct supervisor, still try to have some face time with the student. So we found that it's most successful if we set up, say, I set up bi-weekly meetings with the students. So bi-weekly, even though they generally have another direct supervisor or somebody they report to, I like to meet with the student at least every other week for 30 minutes of, we call it coaching in our business. And that just gives them some time to circle back with you as kind of the head of the organization. You know, they ask questions they might not be able to ask their supervisor. I think it gives you an opportunity to coach them how to be successful with what they're doing. I don't think it works very well if you set up the plan, put the student in place, and then forget about it. Like, I don't think that's going to be super successful. So if you have that opportunity to like spend some of that time with the student, it's I find it super enjoyable myself. And I know the students get a lot out of it too. And then their supervisor, you know, before I have those meetings, I check with their supervisor, what do they need coaching and help with. Point number 7 that I had was just recognize them also. It doesn't always work out with their hours, but if you have team meetings or departmental meetings or staff meetings, if there's a chance for them to participate in that meeting, that's great. And then projects, even simple projects that require them to interact with different members of the team, I found are like, not only does the student end up appreciating that the most, I generally get then feedback from our employees and other team members that how much fun they had working with the student or helping teach the student something. So I think any sort of project that can encourage them to meet with other team members is awesome. And then just when they have a big accomplishment or do something for the team, make sure they're recognized and have some praise there for the student. And then the last thing, and Stephanie kind of touched on this a little bit from a little different perspective, is the 8th thing that I wrote down for success here is just train them on the small things. Like, to us, it's small things, but like email, like they don't know when you say write an email to somebody else in your organization, like they really they get scared. They don't know what to write to those other people. Basic business programs like using Outlook and Excel, they might have taken a class on it, but now to get them used to that type of basic business program, they need some training there. And then even as much as like we have phone scripts, like, you know, how you answer the phone, what you say when you call somebody or you leave a message. So talking on the phones and scripts. So training for them on that. There's a lot of little things that we take for granted. And then it's always cute, like reminding them that you have to follow up with, even with adults. Like if you request a meeting from an adult, sometimes the student just thinks it's going to happen and they don't even know how to do a follow-up call or a reminder. So I think just if you train on the little things in the beginning, most of our students go 2 semesters. And so it's always fun to meet with Stephanie, you know, mid-year. I don't even feel like we have the same student. You know, we get them for the fall and we do all that training on the little things. And by spring, it's like, I have a different employee. And so it's really fun to see their transition. And, you know, those were the 8 points that I had. The last thing that for my personal and the organization, you know, that was how to help make it successful. You know, with social media, with video, that's where we really focus with a lot of our work-based learning students. And I love that, like, they keep us young, and like the other employees, like they like being around them. They like hearing about their activities, and they come up with ideas and things that we're just too old to have that perspective. So they come up with some really good things that provide a lot of value to the organization. So I couldn't be a bigger fan at this point, and appreciate what Richland and Stephanie have done for us.
All right, thank you, Lance. We did have a question come in, and that is from Judith. She's asking, do businesses have any problems with paying the students minimum wage? And are these any students or those with disabilities? So I believe she's asking, kind of going back to what, you know, how you calculate what you want to pay them, and maybe perhaps if you have any experience or how to maybe work with students with disabilities. Anyone?
I can jump in on that.
Mm-hmm.
So the program I work with is typically not include students with disabilities. However, we do have a coordinator in our special education department who coordinates work specifically for students with special needs. And those programs can come with even more help. They may bring an adult supervisor. We call them work coaches to walk them through, and they actually come to work with them. As far as paying minimum wage, I have not heard that's a problem. Today, minimum wage is $14.49, correct, Reed? It changes, but $14.49. And if you took a student for an entire year and they worked 360 hours, 180 first semester, 180 second semester, that would be your cost, somewhere under $5,000. We're fortunate, organizations like the Kenmore team, we have students there who are 20 hours a week sometimes, and they earn 2 credits for their work. So that might be a little bit more, but that's just kind of a way for you to calculate about what it would cost you to have a work-based learning student. I would also like to note for some companies and some situations, you can do an unpaid work-based learning experience. I've found that sometimes that's a familiar situation. Maybe you're working for mom and dad. So those are options. They happen far less frequently than the paid positions do.
All right, and Judith, I'll just wrap that question up. We did a session, I want to say a month or 2 back, and asked the experts on how to specifically work with individuals with disabilities. And so that's on our Facebook and YouTube channel. So that can kind of also answer your question. And with that, I'm gonna
back in for one moment.
What was it?
In order for it to be an unpaid work-based learning experience, the student can't provide any productive work or increased assistance to the business that would lead to profitable gain, if that makes sense.
Perfect. And I think that leads right into our next speaker. So Reed, this is your show. So he is going to cover youth employment standards in Washington State. I did ask him to maybe cover a little bit about internships. So we'll kind of hear that, but I'm going to turn it over to you, Reed.
Yes, thank you. So like Lance said, I will be covering a little bit of the internship requirements for minors and adults too. But my name is Reed Simak. I am the Youth Employment Specialist with the Department of Labor and Industries. And today I'm going to go over some of the employment standards for minors in Washington. And when I'm talking about minors, I really just mean anybody that's under the age of 18. And Washington does have special rules for hiring minors. And those rules touch on a couple of different aspects of employment. So they include record keeping requirements, so the documents that you need in order to hire minors, as well as hours of work limitations, so when they can work, how long their shifts can be. Minors also have different break requirements during their shifts compared with adults. And there are certain job duties that are deemed to be hazardous for minors, and they are prohibited from engaging in them. Well, one thing to note with youth employment rules is we do have separate rules for agricultural and non-agricultural jobs. I am just going to be focusing on non-agricultural jobs since that's the majority of the jobs that minors are working. But please note, if you do hire minors in an agricultural setting, that the rules are going to be slightly different. So there are a couple of things to keep in mind before you actually go out and hire a minor. The first is the youth employment rules cover all minors, even if it's a situation where a parent is trying to hire their own children. Unfortunately, our rules don't contain an exemption for that situation, so they would need to follow the same rules as if they were hiring anybody else. The second thing is that the legal age to work in Washington is 14. So you can hire minors that are under the age of 14, but doing so requires getting authorization from a superior court judge in the county that the minor lives in. In order to get this authorization, you need to download an authorization form from LNI's website and then reach out to the court. Each court has a slightly different process, so you'll want to follow whatever process the court tells you. But once you get that signed authorization form, you simply scan it and email it to teensafety@lni.wa.gov. And then you would just proceed with the normal steps for hiring minors. We were just talking about minimum wage. So minors are required to be paid minimum wage, which is $14.49 in 2022. Minors that are under the age of 16 can be paid 85%. And one thing with the minimum wage is that the minors are subject to the other parts of the minimum wage rule. So that includes paid sick leave and protection from retaliation. So when hiring a minor, there are a couple of documents that you need to have on file before the minor can actually start working. And the first one is a minor work permit. What the minor work permit is an endorsement that's on the company's business license, basically saying that that company's been approved to hire minors. You do apply for the minor work permit through the Department of Revenue, since they're the ones that operate the business licensing system. The minor work permit does have to be renewed annually, and you do need to have a separate permit for each location that the minors will be working at, but one permit covers all of the minors that are working at that location. The second form that you need is a parent school authorization form. And this is an agreement between you as the employer the minor, and then the minor's parent in school, just making sure that everybody's on the same page when it comes to the hours that the minor will be working and then their job duties. With the parent school authorization form, it does need to be renewed at the beginning of each new school year. So by September 30th of every year, you'd want to get a new parent school authorization form. And then they're good throughout that school year and then the following summer. Now, if you hire a minor during the summer and there's no school in session, you can use what's called the parent authorization for summer work. It's basically the same thing as the parent school authorization form. It's just missing the school signature portion. And then once you have the minor working, and if you decide to continue to employ them into the school year, then you would just need to swap that out for the parent school version. The last thing that you need is proof of age for the minor. So this could be a government issued ID or even a notarized statement from a parent or guardian. Unfortunately, school IDs are not considered valid proof of age since they don't have that date of birth on them. Once you do have the permit, the authorization, and the proof of age, you'll just want to keep them on file for 3 years from the minor's last date of employment, but you don't need to send them in anywhere. So once you have those documentation covered, then you'll want to go ahead and schedule the minors to work. A couple things to keep in mind is that there are differences in the number of hours that minors can work based off of 2 factors. So the first one is the age of the minor. So 16 to 17-year-olds can work slightly longer hours compared with 14 to 15-year-olds. And the second thing that determines the number of hours that minors can work is whether it's a school week. And a school week is defined as any week where the minors are receiving instruction. So if they have a couple of days of instruction, a couple of days off, think like a Thanksgiving break, that would still be considered a school week since they are receiving instruction on a couple of days. If they have the whole week off, so a Christmas break or a spring break, that would be considered a non-school week. So during non-school weeks, minors can work full-time, but during school weeks, they are limited to part-time status. One thing to note with the school week hours of work is that minors are prohibited from working during school hours, and that applies even to minors that are homeschooled or not enrolled in school or are taking alternative school. Now, for 16 to 17-year-olds, there are a couple of ways that they can work additional hours. One way is if they are married, a parent, or if they have their high school diploma or GED, or if they are taking college courses, so a Running Start type program. If they meet one of those exceptions, then they're able to automatically work the non-school week hours year-round. You don't need to do anything special in order to have the minors work those additional hours, but you'll want to keep some sort of documentation. So that could be a transcript if they're in Running Start, or a copy of a birth certificate, marriage license, or their diploma. If you have a minor that wants to work additional hours, you can apply for what's called a variance. And very basically, a variance is an application to waive certain hours of work rules. We review the variance applications and approve them on a case-by-case basis, but you would use that in situations where a minor wants to work additional hours, work earlier or later than they're typically allowed, or work during school hours. Typically, we see variances come in for minors that are not enrolled in school or are homeschooled and wanting to work longer hours and during the day. In order to submit a variance, you'll want to download the application from LNI's website and then fill it out. And part of that will include the hours that you would like the minor to work, and then just a brief description of why you're requesting the minors to work those hours. And then you'll just send it via email to that teensafety@lni.wa.gov. We'll review it, and then we'll issue an approval document that will list the hours that the minor can work, and then the time period that that variance is good for. When scheduling minors to work, it's also important to remember that they have different meal and rest break requirements compared with adults. Like hours of work, these are broken down based off of the age of the minor. So 14 to 15-year-olds are required to receive breaks a little bit more frequently compared with older minors. In their case, they have to receive a 30-minute meal break when working shifts that are 4 hours or longer. For 16 and 17-year-olds, they need to get that 30-minute meal break when they're working shifts that are 5 hours or longer. And there's a timing requirement for that older minors too. So they need to get the meal break between the 2nd and the 5th hour of their shift. So there's a 3-hour window for that break. With meal breaks, they can be unpaid, but they do have to be that full 30 minutes, they uninterrupted, and minors can't waive their breaks, unlike adults. For rest periods, minors simply need to get a 10-minute paid break for every 4 hours that they work. And for 14 to 15-year-olds, they need to get some type of break, either a meal period or a rest break every 2 hours. And another thing to keep in mind when hiring minors is that there are certain job duties that are considered dangerous and that minors are prohibited from engaging in. And much like meal and rest breaks and hours of work, there are different restrictions based off of the age of the minor. So there are 30 prohibited duties for all minors, 16 to 17 and 14 to 15. And they include things like working with power-driven equipment, woodworking equipment, working in service occupations alone past 8 p.m., and working around hazardous substances that are carcinogenic, corrosive, or highly toxic. Typically, we see that pop up with cleaning materials. So if you have minors that are cleaning, you'll just want to check the safety data sheet to see if any of them are considered carcinogenic or toxic or corrosive. And if they are, then they wouldn't be able to use those chemicals. And that's true even if they are wearing personal protective equipment like gloves or eye protection. For minors that are under 16, they have a couple of additional restrictions. So those include things like cooking and baking, working close to or operating power-driven machinery, and working in construction. So one area that is similar to youth employment, but is actually regulated a little bit different, is internships. So internships are regulated under the Minimum Wage Act. And as we talked about earlier, there are differences between paid and unpaid internships. And unpaid internships are allowable if the minor is determined to be the one that primarily benefits from the relationship, or excuse me, the intern primarily benefits from the internship. If the employer is primarily benefiting, then that intern would need to be treated as an employee. For unpaid interns, they can receive a stipend to reimburse them for expenses incurred, but they can't be receiving a regular wage. For minors that are in paid internship programs, since they would be considered employees, they would have to follow all of the youth employment rules that I just went over. If you do have questions about whether or not a particular program should be a paid or unpaid internship, please reach out to the Employment Standards Program here at LNI. And that email address is esgeneral@lni.wa.gov. And they'll be able to walk you through whether or not that needs to be a paid position or if it can be unpaid. If you have other questions relating to youth employment, you can reach out to our general phone line or our teen safety mailbox, where you will receive a response. You're also more than happy or welcome to reach out to me directly, and my contact information is up there. Do we have any questions?
We did have Brian in the chat wanted to make a clarification, and maybe Stephanie or Reed, if you can speak to this. He just mentioned that students enrolled, first of all, this goes back to when you were mentioning variances and hours that they're allowed to work during the week. he mentioned that students enrolled in worksite learning are able to work during school hours. So is that, if you guys can elaborate on that?
Yeah, so they are allowed to work during school hours. It's a little bit of a unique program. So minors in that worksite learning, the hours that they're working for the company before their school gets out don't count to those limits that we talked about. So say they go work for their job and start their worksite learning at noon and school gets out at 2 normally, that 2-hour window doesn't count to their hours per day and hours per week total.
Okay, perfect. Thank you, Brian, for raising that. It's, I think, important to differentiate. So thank you. And it looks like that wraps it up. So thank you, Reed. Thank you, Lance. Thank you, Stephanie. Again, if anyone has any questions, Reed's contact information was on that last slide. And a copy of this presentation is going to be available on the Chamber's Facebook page and on our YouTube channel in the next couple of days. So again, definitely contact them with any of your questions. But with that, I think we're about finished up. So I think I'm going to give everyone back a few minutes of their day. I do want to say thank you again to our speakers today for putting together the presentation. And it's a lot of information, and you all did a great job of kind of making it very easy to understand. So I appreciate that. And thank you again, everyone, for being here. We do have someone in the attendees who wants to go ahead and mention something. I believe this is an individual that Stephanie works with. His name is Brian. So I'm going to bring him on really quick and see if he can. It looks like, Brian, you should be able to speak.
All right. Thank you. Not sure why my camera view, I maybe just coming in as a guest. I'm a worksite learning coordinator now at Hanford High School, was at Rivers Edge High School the last 2 years. And I just wanted to be sure that we mentioned the exemption so that students can work during school hours. I know that was something Stephanie and I learned that being new to this, and there is an exemption as long as they're part of an approved worksite learning program. So I think as we talk about the 20 hours and then the 28-hour variance, one other thing to consider is that students can make part of their school day a worksite learning experience. So for instance, I had kids at Rivers Edge who might go to school in class in the morning and be enrolled in worksite learning and work 12 to 5. And the rules around those hours being counted, we could get into more detail, but essentially the during school time, my understanding with the WAC and everything is that does not count towards their overall 20 hours. So there's some nuances there that if anybody has questions or goes, hey, well, I have somebody I need 12 to 5, I can't work them 3 to 6 every day. We can find ways to work through that.
And I would just kind of go back to if anyone is on with us today and you have any questions, I think between the individuals we have on the webinar, definitely reach out to them. But yeah, Brian, you raised an excellent point because I certainly did not know that. So
yeah, and I'm super glad he raised that point because I was getting slightly uncomfortable during Reed's talk that I had violated something.
Lance, I wouldn't let you get in trouble.
I know you wouldn't. So thank you to all for everybody's points. Appreciate y'all.
All right. Well, okay, now I'm going to give everyone back a few more minutes. So again, thank you to our speakers today. I really appreciate it. Thank you, Kevin, for being on, and our partner in the program, STCU. Again, a copy is going to be on our Facebook page and YouTube channel to view later on if anyone wants to come back to it. So thank you again, everyone. Have a good rest of your day.